And welcome back, everybody. Rusty here with the Rugby Review, and this week I'm going to be taking you through the fourth and final week of the Autumn International Test Games that had been happening in the rugby universe. So the first game we're going to go over right now is Belgium versus Samoa. We have Belgium 13, Samoa 13 as well. So let me explain a little bit more about this game before we dive into the stats a little bit deeper here. This particular game was the championship game of a round-robin tournament to establish the very last team for the 2027 Rugby World Cup. So, based off previous outcomes, Samoa came into this game 1 point ahead of Belgium, meaning Belgium had to win this game outright in order to qualify for the World Cup, and Samoa had the ability to either tie the game or win the game to qualify for the World Cup. And obviously, as we can see, the result benefited Samoa this particular time with the tie between the two teams. So, with that being said, quick congratulations to Samoa. They got the result they needed to be qualified for their 10th Rugby World Cup. So congratulations to Samoa. It's bitter ending for Belgium. You never want to come up short of qualifying for a World Cup. However, if you were able to watch the game, there was a lot of positive to be taken from this game for Belgium as they move forward and develop the team for 2031. Their defensive effort, the defensive effort by Belgium was incredibly strong for an 80-minute game. It was really impressive to watch. Just Belgium on defense being able to match the physicality of the big, strong Samoans. So if we look at the stats here a little bit, we can see possession and territory are skewed and favored toward Samoa, indicating Samoa was the team on offense more often during the course of this game. As you can see by the tackles made stat, 178 tackles made for Belgium, 122 for Samoa. Again, just to emphasize, Belgium being the team playing defense more throughout the game. Now, what I brought up just a second ago was how well Belgium played on defense. And I think that can be emphasized with the turnovers won stat at the bottom of the slide here. Belgium turned Samoa over 8 times during the course of the game versus only 3 turnovers won for Samoa. Again, not the outcome that Belgium would have wanted. However, I think there are positives that Belgium can take from this game to help them move forward as they develop a team for 2031. And would like to say again, congratulations to Samoa for qualifying for the 2027 Rugby World Cup. It'll be a lot of fun to see how things shake up at that particular tournament. So moving to the next game here, we have a very, very close physical competition between Georgia and Japan. We have Georgia 23, Japan 25. So this game took place in Georgia, so this was going to be a very difficult game for Japan to win. However, Japan came ready to play, and their defense is what kept them in this game and what allowed them to pull out the victory. So I would like to zoom in on the top half here. And again, if we look at both possession and territory, possession is more heavily favored and skewed towards Georgia, which is the team with the black ink, and Japan is in the red ink. So again, possession, territory favored towards Georgia, but not crazy heavily skewed towards Georgia. Look at tackles made. 110 tackles made for Georgia versus 160 for Japan. Again, just to emphasize the point that I made a second ago, where Georgia is the team playing offense a little bit more. They had the ball more, playing in Japan's half more. But the Japanese defensive effort is what really kept Japan in this game. And honestly, it's probably what won Japan this particular rugby game. If you look at meters gained, 212 meters gained for Georgia, 225 for Japan. Despite Georgia having the ball more, the Japanese defensive effort really kept Georgia from utilizing that offensive advantage that they had during the course of the game. So great win for Japan on the road. It was a lot of fun to watch this game just because of how close and competitive this game was. Now our next game was not nearly as close. It was Wales versus New Zealand. We had Wales 26, New Zealand 52. And I'm just going to jump right into it here. Again, you could probably have guessed based off the ending score that New Zealand was a much more dominant team on offense and took all their opportunities when they had them. So, if we zoom in on the stats here a little bit, possession, territory, especially possession, is heavily skewed and heavily favorited towards New Zealand for this game. Now, to emphasize the point of to emphasize the point of Wales playing a lot of defense and making a lot of tackles during this game, just look at the tackles made stat. You have 223 tackles for Wales versus only 85 tackles for New Zealand. New Zealand made about 1/3 the amount of tackles that Wales did. And again, you could tell watching this game, New Zealand was the better team, but sometimes when you look at the stats of the game, it just really emphasizes the point of one team played better than the other. And I think that can really be emphasized with meters gained as well. 278 meters gained for Wales versus 542 for New Zealand. New Zealand had almost twice the amount of meters gained during the course of the game. Despite Wales putting in a mountain of effort on defense, it was not enough to keep New Zealand from running wild and scoring on them all day. So, just really strong game. Really strong game by New Zealand this particular week. Probably a bounce back from the England loss last week. And what I want to just zoom in on here is penalties conceded. Again, this will emphasize the point of New Zealand just played a much better game than Wales did this particular week. Penalties conceded. 14 penalties conceded for Wales versus only 4 for New Zealand. That's too much of a discrepancy there, and New Zealand will take advantage of that 10 times out of 10. So good win for New Zealand. Very strong win to finish their international rugby season, and a nice game to end the international test season on. So let's move into the next game, which is Ireland versus South Africa. We had Ireland 13, South Africa 24. Now, when I was watching this game, I was kind of surprised by just how ill-disciplined Ireland was during the course of this whole game. There was a 20-minute red in the first half, and they had at least 4 yellow cards throughout the rest of the game. South Africa is too good of a team to have that much ill discipline to think you can win the game. So Ireland can't be that ill disciplined and think, oh, a positive outcome is going to happen. It's like, no, you're playing South Africa. You give up that many yellow cards and a 20-minute red. I'm sorry. It's not happening for Ireland this week, and it most certainly did not. But these stats, interestingly enough, would not really indicate that Ireland gave up so many yellows and had a 20-minute red. Possession territory stats are pretty darn close. They're 50-50 essentially for both of them. South Africa had to make more tackles than Ireland did. However, South Africa did have a little bit more meters gained than Ireland did, but it's nothing too drastically different. But what I would like to zoom in on is penalties conceded. 18 penalties conceded for Ireland versus 13 penalties for South Africa. Now, neither team is playing horribly well disciplined this game because both are having penalty counts 10 and up. However, Ireland with 18 penalties, almost 20 penalties, is way too many at the international level. And it just, again, too much ill discipline, too much time playing a man down against a team as good as South Africa results in the outcome that happened. So for Ireland, this will be definitely a game that they'll have to go back and review, change a lot before the Six Nations tournament comes up in a few weeks' time here. Now, the next game was a fun, high-scoring game of France versus Australia. So you had France 48, Australia 33. Now, if you look at the stat line here, there's nothing really on the stats that show France being the dominant team to have at least a 3-score margin of victory. However, if you did watch the game, France's defensive effort is what slowed down and shut down Australia a little bit. I mean, honestly, defense was kind of optional this particular game, as you can see based off the scoreline here. But when France did put a defensive effort in to stop Australia, they did it enough times where they could take advantage and stretch the lead out by the end of the game and seal their victory. So, again, we're just going to look in at the top half here. Possession territory aren't really showcasing one team being more dominant than the other. It's really just showcasing Australia had the ball more, but the game was played in Australia's half more as well. Again, as I said a little earlier, France had to put in a very strong effort defensively to hold Australia out of their half as much as they could. And, if you look at the meters gained stat, it's just showcasing, yes, Australia did have the ball more. Yes, Australia was running around the field more, but France was much more effective, much more efficient with their offensive opportunities when they had them. So, not necessarily the best game defensively played by either team. So this will give France a lot to improve, especially defensively, before the Six Nations really starts to kick off, and then this definitely gives Australia things to work on and think about in their off season, because I think this is like the fourth game in a row that they've lost. So again, this will give Australia a lot to think about and improve along with France, both especially from the defensive side of things. Now the next game that took place was Italy versus Chile. We had Italy 34, Chile 19. Now, I was a bit surprised with how well and how close this game was through about 65 minutes or so, because with as well as Italy had played the last couple weeks, I fully expected Italy to dominate this game a little bit more than they did, but hats off to Chile. They played very physical, very strong defensively. However, Chile had a yellow card around 60 minutes into the game, which gave Italy the chance to extend their lead and provide a bit of a much more comfort with their margin of victory. So if we zoom in here, we can see possession plus territory very much skewed and favored towards the Italian team, to emphasize the point of Chile being the team playing defense more often. Take a look at the tackles made stat here. 95 tackles for Italy, 147 for Chile. Again, just to emphasize the point of Chile playing defense a little bit more of the time than Italy was, and you can really see that with meters gained. 434 meters gained for Italy versus 207 for Chile. That's over twice the meters gained for Italy versus Chile. It's just too much opportunity for a team like Italy, where at some point in time the defense is going to tire out. There's going to be holes, and Italy will just start storming through them as they were and take their scoring opportunities when they had them. In addition, if we slide a little further down the stat sheet here, we can see ill discipline again kind of crawled into Chile's game. Look at penalties conceded. Only 7 penalties conceded for Italy versus 16 for Chile. A team like Chile trying to upset Italy, ill discipline, can't really climb into the game. Otherwise, it's just going to be too challenging to overcome the deficit that happens. Moving on, we have a very lopsided affair here. We have Scotland Rugby versus Tonga. So we have Scotland 56, Tonga 0. With the talent that Tongan teams tend to have, it's always a little surprising when you see them get blown out such as this. But if you were able to watch the game, there was a lot of ill discipline on Tonga's part, and Scotland just looked like they were much more physically fit than Tonga was. And, if you just kind of look at this whole stat line here, a lot of this stuff is just in favor of Scotland, showing just how much more dominant Scotland was playing this game, and Tonga just didn't really have it going this particular game. So to emphasize that, let's just zoom in on the top half here. Possession, territory, heavily favored towards Scotland for this particular game. In addition, you can see Tonga was on the defensive side significantly more than Scotland was. Scotland only had to make 76 tackles during the course of this entire game versus 189 tackles for Tonga. So not only is possession and territory heavily skewed towards Scotland, showcasing Scotland's on offense more, you can see based off the tackle stats, Tonga is having to play defense a heck of a lot more. Now, unfortunately for Tonga, their defensive effort was not that good this week and let up a lot of meters, which gave Scotland a very large number of scoring opportunities that they took advantage of. So if you look at meters gained, you have 726 meters gained for Scotland versus only 178 for Tonga. So hopefully this is the beginning of a rebuild period for Tonga, because there was a lot to be desired this week for Tonga and a lot of improvements that can be made for the Tongan rugby team. And this was an incredibly strong end to the fall international test period for Scotland, giving them a lot of good momentum heading into the Six Nations this up and coming winter. Now, the last game that I was able to watch this particular week was the England versus Argentina game. Now, if you were able to watch this game, you know just as well as I do that this looked like a game that England was just going to be in complete and utter domination. Hats off to Argentina. They got down, I think it was like 17 to 3, and then we're down like 21-3, I think, at one point in time, and then fought all the way back to tying the game. I believe that, again, they tied the game at 17. Yeah, they ended up tying the game at 17, and then England finally got their act back together, utilized their defensive pressure to transition offense like they had been doing the last few weeks, and then they were able to definitely shut this game out pretty comfortably. So let's just look in at the stats here. Now, again, at some point in time, Argentina got it together and offensively started to play a lot better and was holding onto the ball a lot more. And you can see that with the possession and territory stats, both very much skewed in favoring the Argentinian team. Now, again, the past 3 weeks, England has been using a very strong defensive effort to fuel offensive play, and yet again, they did it again this weekend. They have less possession, less territory than Argentina. Look at the tackles made stat. 215 tackles for England versus 104 for Argentina. England is making literally twice the number of tackles that Argentina is. However, look at meters gained. Meters gained stat is 424 for England versus 414 for Argentina. So again, despite the fact that England is the team playing defense the majority of the time during these games, when they do have the ball, England, they are being very effective and very efficient, which is leading to plenty of scoring opportunities. And with their defensive effort, England is able to keep the opposition from scoring enough points to win the game. So, very, very strong win for England to close out this autumn test series, which gives them a lot of good momentum rolling into the Six Nations Cup Championship coming up in a few weeks here. I forget exactly when it starts. But that concludes the Autumn International Test Series. I hope everybody had as much fun watching those games as I did. If anybody likes these videos, feel free to leave a like or subscribe. Or if anybody has any ideas on improvements to be made, let me know in the comments. Thanks, and hope you enjoy the games that are coming up this weekend.